We are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is Abe, your host. Today we are going to get into Leave the World Behind, some entertainment for your current apocalypse, which is July 18th, 2024. I believe it's a Thursday. Is it a Thursday? Hopefully it's a cool one out there. I know it's cooling down in Kentucky, knock on wood. It's getting nice. We covered the QR code. Now, if you scan that QR code, where does it lead you to? We are going to get into that today. We're doing a deep dive with a read-along and commentary of Leave the World Behind. So, and it's going to be a good paranormal episodes for all you ghost hunters and paranormal geeks out there. I'm not making fun of you because I am one too. It'll be good for you. So stay tuned. Buckle up. Enjoy the show. Chapter 12. They had finished the basement for Ruth's mother, a dignified, withered creature. Silk scarves and colored coordinated sweets. She'd come to live with them when she turned 90 years old. Much complaining, but the winters in Chicago were terrible, and there was no one left there to keep a close watch on her. Ruth had handled the sale of her house, sent disbursements to her sister and their brother, then moved Mama into the guest room. She liked to walk to the Met, looked at the impressionist paintings, then sit at the diner with a cup of tea and a Manhattan clam chowder. Had she not died, she'd been stranded in the dark 3-bedroom on the 14th floor, Small Mercy. G.H. led the way downstairs, where they almost never went. That city dweller's fantasy. Rooms you barely need, switching on the lights as he went. He had not realized how much light connoted safety, and how much dark its opposite. Yin and yang. Even as a boy, he had not feared the dark, so this was a surprise. Just watch your step, he said. Some tenderness for his wife. This is my house, Ruth said. She was holding tight to the railing. She felt it important to underscore this fact. Well, they paid for it, G.H. said. He had driven fast. But there were some things that he couldn't outrun. His reticence was because of a very particular burden. He knew that something was wrong, truly wrong. I can't exactly throw them out, G.H. said. He didn't want to say that he had known something was coming. He had a premonition, perhaps. His business was clairvoyance. You looked at the yield curve, arching and slumping like an inchworm, making its insufficient progress. And it told you everything you needed to know. He had known not to trust particular parabola. It was more than portent, it was a promise. Something was upon them. It had been decreed. You saw how dirty they had the kitchen, Ruth said. Ruth didn't need to say, "What would Mom think of that?" because Mom hovered around. The basement had been intended for her. An exterior ramp around the back of the house, a handicap ramp. Easier than the stairs, but she'd died before she got to visit. Ruth knew she was evolving into a pale imitation of her mother. Another way of saying that she was old. It just happened. You found yourself holding your grandbabies, twins, and not saying anything about the fact that they had two moms, a lesbian mother. Clara was a professor of the classics at Mount Holyoke. Maya was the headmaster of a Montessori school. They had a big, cold, clapboard house with a turret. Mom would have got a kick out of her mocha-colored grandsons, great-grandsons, made of the genetic issue of Clara's brother, James, who did something in Silicon Valley. The boys looked just like both of their mothers. Something you'd not have thought possible, but there it was, in black and white. Ha ha ha. GH flicked on the lights, forgetting to pause in gratitude that they still worked. There was a big closet, a cache of Duracells, a flat of Volvic, some bags of Rancho Gordo beans, boxes of Cliff Bars, and Barilla Fusilli, which is noodles, stored in a heavy-duty plastic bin because there were mice in the country. So, this is very good. Sounds like they're definitely stocked up for the apocalypse. Cans of tuna, a gasoline canister's worth of olive oil, a case of cheap Malbec, which is red wine. That was not half bad. Bed linens in those vacuum bags that sucked out all the air, which we've invested in. The two of them could be comfortably housebound for a month, if not longer. GH practically dared a snowstorm to arrive, but thus far none had. They said that was global warming. Everything is in order. She murmured something to show she'd heard him. Hang on a second. She had murmured something to show she had heard them. They'd spent too much money remodeling. Improvement was an addiction. GH's business was money preservation. Actual spending was so abstract to him that he did, as the contractor had said. Danny was one of those men who other men didn't want to seem a fool in front of. He had power over men that was almost sexual, in the way that sex always ends up being about power. You'd do what he said. And maybe in your worst moments, you'd worry that Danny was laughing at you. Their checks had certainly paid for Danny's daughter year at private school. That's why they rented, to recoup. It smells down here, Ruth said, making a face. But it didn't really smell. Rosa cleaned the place. Her husband tended the lawn. And their kids came out and assisted. It was a family affair. They were Mexicans. They were from Honduras. Rosa would not have left a smell. The carpet snap said that she vacuumed, even the unused basement. There was a bedroom with a sofa and a table and a wall-mounted television. They made the bed up and expectant. She sat and slipped off her shoes. "It doesn't," GH said as he sat on the edge of the bed, more heavily than he meant to. He couldn't stop himself sighing when he did things like that. He tried to imagine the morning's relief, the funny news on the radio. A band of raccoons broke into a substation in Delaware and knocked out all the power all over the East Coast. Or some subcontractor's most junior employee had a terrible first day. What were we worried about? What were we afraid of? Market confidence would be restored. There would be a windfall for certain stoic bettors. Ruth was at a loss. Their normal routine was to first unlock all the cabinets filled with special and necessary things. Swimsuits, flip-flops, Shiseido sunscreen, a wool Hermes picnic blanket, and in the pantry, a tin of Maldon salt, a bottle of olive oil from Italy, the horrifying sharp Wushoff knives, 4 jars of Luxardo cherries, Clase Azul, Oban, Hendrix, the wines guest had brought as hostess gifts, dry vermouth, bitters. They'd reunite with their possessions, rub them on their skin, scatter them all around the rooms, and feel truly at home. They'd pull off their clothes. What was the point of having a home in the country if you couldn't walk around almost naked? And make Manhattans, and slip into the pool or the hot tub, or just into the bed? They still went to the bed with each other, aided by those most effective blue tablets. Ha, Pfizer. I'm scared. We are here, he said, as he paused. Because it was important to remember, it is safe here. He thought of his canned tomatoes. There was enough to last them for months. There were unopened toothbrushes in the bathroom drawer. There were fresh towels, rolled jauntily and stacked in a little pyramid. Ruth showered. Feeling clean made such a difference to her. In the bedroom dresser there was an old t-shirt from a charity run she couldn't remember. A pair of shorts she could not identify. She put these on. Felt immediately ridiculous. She didn't want the people upstairs to see her in these cheap clothes. G.H. tried the bedroom television because he was curious. It showed nothing, just a blue screen, channel after channel. He undid his tie. When she'd been alive, G.H. had felt his mom's presence at an indictment. G.H. was so accustomed to being who he was and had come to believe that was success. When Mom had come out to inspect Maya, she'd rebuked him for his 14-hour days, for living so high up. Unnatural, she would say, for the delusion of their New York lives. It had shaken him. They'd changed their lives. They brought the place on the park, sent Maya to Dalton, and lived prudently. Sometimes he did miss the ground underfoot, the wisdom of the elders. Ruth returned in a billow of steam. I tried the television. Same thing, he said. He had to share this with her, though he had not expected otherwise. She shifted and adjusted the clean bedding. The wind was noisy. So what do you think it is? She said. G.H. knew her. It had been decades. I think it's something we're going to have to laugh about when we hear what it actually was. That's what I think, he said, trying to comfort her. He didn't think this, but it was right to lie sometimes. It's a white lie. He looked at himself in the mirror and thought about their apartment, their home, their suits in his walk-in closet, their coffee maker he'd settle on after spending weeks of researching. He thought about the planes over Manhattan and how it must have looked to the passengers as the place went dark. He thought about the satellites over the planes, over the Manhattan, and the pictures that were taking on what they should show. He thought about the space station over the satellites, over the plains, and wondered what the multiracial, multinational crew of scientists would have made the whole thing from their unique vantage, sometimes distance, showed a thing most clearly. GH understood electricity as a commodity. This wasn't some vicissitude in the market. You couldn't pull the plug on the nation's financial capital. Insurance companies would be in litigation for decades. If the lights went out in New York City, that was an act of God stuff. Act of God. The kind of thing his mother-in-law might have said. So, let's go into a deep dive. Where did that QR code send us? Let's get into the paranormal, extra features, bonus shit of why you guys are tuning into this podcast. Let's see where it sent us. So, where does the QR code reach? Mercer County, West Virginia. Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park. Now, why is there synchronicity? Why do I have deja vu? Why is there so much weird stuff going on? Because I'm a jack of all trades fortune teller. I lived in Mercer County, Kentucky, and I hiked along the Shawnee River in Mercer County, Kentucky, in Shakertown. But this is a different one. Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park. Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park. There's something unnatural about this Mercer County attraction. A Native American burial ground. Violent deaths. Freak accidents. Who knew a simple amusement park could have such a dark past? Explore this creepy, maybe cursed land. One of the world's most haunted places. Arrange a private tour, join paranormal investigators to ghost hunt or brave the dark carnival in October. Lake Shawnee story. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park was crippled long before local entrepreneur Conley Snitto broke ground for the circular wing. At least, that's what most locals think. Ask anyone familiar with the area, and they'll tell you no one should have turned the grassy field into the carnival. But most things seem obvious in retrospect. When Snitto purchased the property during the 1920s, he had no idea it had witnessed decades of bloody unrest. The Clay incident. So here we get into the father of the family, Amanda's husband, and leave the world behind. His name is Clay. Interesting. Clay. And here we get into the synchronicity, which I don't think it is. I think it was on purpose. The Clay incident. Lake Shawnee's restless past originates in the 18th century. During the late 1700s, Mitchell Clay brought his young family out west. They established an 800-acre farm and raised 14 children. Tragedy struck the Clays in 1783. A Native American tribe slew 2 of the children while Mitchell was out hunting. They kidnapped one of the boys. His name was Ezekiel, only to burn him at the stake. Clay retaliated. With the help of other settlers, he tracked down several Native Americans and killed them. The scarred homestead was never the same. All that glitters. The Clay property didn't attract much notice until the 1920s. That's when Snitto appeared with his rides and attractions, circular swings, a water slide, a dance hall, a speakeasy. He also added a pond and a swimming hole, complete with canoes. At some point, things started to go wrong. Lake Shawnee fans know the facts intimately. A little girl died on the swings, and a boy drowned in the pond. All told, roughly, 6 visitors died during the amusement park's brief history. In 1966, the attraction was abandoned. The cheerful turquoise, red, and green rides slowly faded and flaked. Before too long, their rusty skeletons surrendered to the restless undergrowth. What lies beneath? After 20 years, another businessman approached Lake Shawnee. Gaylord White was his name. Thought the sleepy meadows seemed an ideal future for neighbors. But as construction crews tore into the grass and soil, they unearthed bones and Native American artifacts. Kind of reminds me of the Poltergeist movie. Interesting. It turned out the amusement park sat atop an ancient burial ground of Native Americans, and most of the skeletons belonged to children. Archaeologists believe the remains had been there long before settlers had moved west in pioneer days. Was the Clay family cursed too? But they do offer bone-chilling tours. The White family decided not to challenge fate. Instead of developing community lots, they left the burial ground and the rides intact. That means Lake Shawnee will continue to stand as a true Mercer County highlight. But don't just take our word for it. The Abandoned Amusement Park has attracted ghost hunters and paranormal experts for years. In fact, Lake Shawnee ranks as one of the most traveled channel's most terrifying places in America. ABC goes even further. Their experts declared the property one of the 10 most haunted places in the world. Visitors have heard footsteps, mysterious chants of Native Americans, and children of Native American ghosts. Sometimes one of the swings will move on its own. At one point, someone got locked in a shabby ticket booth, even though the doors do not lock. So, is Lake Shawnee really haunted? I don't know. You decide for yourself. Although the amusement park is private property, there are regular paranormal tours throughout the year. The owners can usually make a private arrangement for you, too. Just call them before heading out for a visit, or visit in October for the Dark Carnival. You arrive at dusk just as the bony trees and creaky rides turn into silhouettes. People who visited the park when it was open or had their own strange encounters tell Lake Shawnee stories, give tours, and light a bonfire. There's also a haunted trail which you can hike through, a haunted corn maze which you can go through, complete with creepy clowns. You can even camp out if you want to camp out on the grounds, if you dare. Lake Shawnee, that's where the QR code leads. Paranormal, ghost, Indian burial ground. Ooh-wee-oo. One more chapter, and we will wrap up this episode of Conspiracy Corner Podcast. Alright, have I tickled y'all's fancy as far as paranormal, ghost stuff, Native American? Let's do one more chapter so we don't end on chapter 13. And let's wrap this up like a nice little Christmas present and send it off to the rodeo, baby. Chapter 13 of Leave the World Behind. Your kid's voice could wake you up. Your kid's presence could wake you up. Amanda felt Rose's fat little body rock into the gulf between her and Clay, even before she felt the girl's wet breath too near to her ear. "Mom, Mom," she said. A soft hand on her arm, gentle, but almost insistent. She sat up. "Rosie?" The previous year, the girl had declared she was done with, an example, Rose. "Mom, Rose was wide awake. Rose restored by the night. Rose a bloom. It had been this way her whole life. Mornings she was dying to do. She opened up her eyes and jumped to the floor. Mrs. Weston, the neighbor downstairs, had raised 2 daughters in the same 1,100 square feet, so she never complained, of course, from noise. Rose didn't understand how her brother could stay asleep until 11, 12, 1 maybe. Mornings, everything seemed so thrilling to her. Wash your face, choose your clothes, read a book. Rose was very enthusiastic. Everything was possible. When you're the younger child, you learn to fend for yourself. There's something wrong with the TV, she said. And by the way, we will do a deep dive on Friends and Doja Cat and all of that jazz and Julia Roberts. Stay tuned for that. Maybe next episode. Who knows? Honey, this is not an emergency. Then she remembered. This is the emergency broadcast system. Amanda slapped the 2 slack pillows into absence. It's all messed up. The first few channels were black and white. Dancing light. After that, all white. Just nothing. White noise. Static. They'd forgotten to draw the blinds. Outside it was light, but indirect. Not clouds, but the early hour. The storm they had thought was coming wasn't after all. As she looked at it, the squat clock beside ticked from 7:48 to 7:49. So, electricity. Some blackout. Honey, I don't know. Can you fix it? Rose said. She was just young enough to believe her parents could do anything. It's not fair. It's a vacation. And you said on vacation we can watch as much TV as we want to. Or have as much screen time as we want. Shh. Daddy's sleeping. Go wait in the living room. I'm coming. I promise. Rose stomped away. That was how she walked. And Amanda picked up her phone. The screen woke up, happy to see her, and she was happy too. Not 1 news alert, but 4. But just as before, she couldn't see more than the dispatch. She pressed on the alert, and the screen tried and failed to connect. The same headline. Major blackout reported on the east coast of the United States. Then, Hurricane Farah makes landfall in North Carolina. Then, breaking news. East coast of the United States reports power failure. Then, a final breaking news, followed by nonsensical letters. She hoped the television would work, but they'd stopped listening to NPR when 4-year-old Rosie had intoned, "I'm David Green," she said. And 7-year-old Archie asked the Pussy Riot. They'd protected the kids from so much. Pussy Riot, I think it's a punk band. It's like a liberal chick punk band. We'll have to go and do a deep dive of it too. I gotta make notes of all this. I'm trying, man. I'm trying to do deep dives on this stuff. I hope you guys are enjoying this series. Amanda smoothed the sheet under her hand. Bumped Clay's ass. "Clay," he mumbled, and shook him by the shoulder. "Get up. Look." His mouth was sour, eyes unfocused. Amanda had her phone in his face. He made an unintelligible sound. Ugh, like a groan. "Look." She shook the phone again. "I can't see." In those moments of waking, it was impossible to see anything. You had to force your eyes to focus. But really, he meant the phone had gone dark. She jabbed at it. "Oh, here, check this out." "What?" he said. He remembered last night, but could not push himself from sleep into wakefulness so quickly. It looks like no one murdered us, okay? He said. She ignored this. The news, honey, look. The screen before him said nothing. Amanda, it doesn't say anything. Just the date, just the same photograph, a snapshot of the kids they'd used as their Christmas card 2 years before. It was just there. She needed Clay to share the burden of this information. He yawned. It went on for a long moment. Are you sure? What did it say? He asked. Of course I'm sure. Was she? Amanda studied the phone. How do you see the alerts? It's not opening the app, but there were 4, I swear, 4 alerts. That same one about the blackout, then another about another blackout, and then something about that hurricane. What was it? Farrah? Something like that. And one that just said breaking. And it was... Breaking what? He said. It just said a bunch of gibberish, honey. They abused that breaking. You know that, right? Quote unquote. They abused that breaking. Breaking. Polls show the Liberal Democrats take the lead in the Austrian congressional races. Breaking. Adam Sandler says his new movie is his best work yet. Breaking. Doris, who gives a fuck, inventor of the automatic ice cream maker, dead at age 99. No, it was not even words, just letters. It must have been, I don't know, I guess a mistake, she said. Maybe that's the network, honey. The cell network. Maybe there's something wrong with that. Would a blackout affect that? Clay said. But he didn't know how to fit the world together. Who truly did, though? Honestly. You think there's something wrong with the cell phones? Or is it just where we are? Because my phone's been spotty ever since we got here. It worked in town when I went to the grocery. We're kind of out there. We're out in the country, you know. This happened last year, too, remember? And that place we rented wasn't nearly as remote. Or she didn't say something so bad happened that even the New York Times was affected. Amanda stood and drank from the bottle on the bedside. It was room temperature, and what she most wanted was cold water. 4 news alerts. I didn't even get that many on election night, she said as she walked to the bathroom. She studied her phone as she peed. It did not tell her any more. Clay pulled on the boxer shorts he'd lost in the night and looked out at the backyard. Despite the portent of a storm, it seemed like any other summer morning. Even the wind seemed to have abated. Indeed, he had looked closer than it was possible for him to look. He had understood the stillness as a response to that wind. He had noticed the insects had gone quiet. Shh. He had even noticed the birds were not calling. He had noticed that in strange moments like this, when the moon had passed before the sun, the temporary shadow the animals did not understand, during an eclipse, everything goes silent. She left the bathroom and she passed her husband, waiting for his turn. I'm going to make us some coffee, she said. The phone felt heavy in her thick cotton pocket. Rose was at the kitchen island with a bowl of cereal. Amanda remembered it was not so long ago when the girl had needed an adult to intercede to fetch the bowl, fill it, slice the banana, pour the milk. She had tried not to resent it all the time. She had tried to remember how fleeting those days were, and now they were gone. There was the last time she had sung her children to sleep, the last time she had wiped the feces from the recesses of their buttocks, the last time when she had seen her son naked, and perfect as he was the day that she met him. You never knew when a time is the last time, because if you do know, you could never go on with life. Hi, baby, she said, as she scooped coffee into the coffee maker. Another normal, beautiful day, isn't it? Can I watch a movie on your computer? Said Rose. The internet is out, honey. Otherwise, I'd let you watch Netflix. Listen. Haha. Product placement. Sorry. Listen, I have to tell you. This vacation sucks, Rose said. Last night, these people, the Washingtons, the people who own this house, they come by here, so there's been... What noun did she need? There's been a problem with their car, and they were not far from here, so they came here even though they rented the house to us for a week. You had to be willing to lie to be a mother, or maybe just a person. Sometimes you had to lie. What are you talking about? Rose said. Already she didn't care. She wanted to text Hazel, her friend, and see what she was doing. Hazel was probably watching TV right now at that very moment. There was a problem with their car, and they weren't far away, and they knew we were here, and they thought maybe we could just come by, and maybe they could explain. It was not even hard to disassemble. The children couldn't hold complex things, even simple things, really, in their heads. And also, they really didn't care. They were tiny, little, beautiful narcissists. Clay in his boxer shorts and sleepy eyes came into the room. I'll take some of that coffee, he said. Amanda filled him a mug. I was just telling Rose about the Washingtons. Dad, the TV ain't working. Rose tugged on his arm as she said. He was the one who would care. He was the only one who would help her. The hot liquid splashed onto his right foot. Easy, baby. Did you forget to put your bowl in the sink? Amanda had said. She read a book on how to talk to kids so they would listen better. Clay, you should put your clothes on. Those people are here, she said. She heard the rudeness in this and thought about it twice. The Washingtons. They are just downstairs, honey. Dad, can you fix it? Rose said. Let's just slow it down. Maybe they'd been too permissive about screen time. Parceled out like narcotic that it was, Clay was unable to resist her entreaties. As a toddler, she'd called for Daddy in a way that was very specific. A girl needed her father. He put his coffee down and fiddled with the remote control. Snow, a bit of poetry. For what you saw, what the signal was broken. Yeah, this doesn't look like it's working. Can you, reset it or something? Or go up on the roof or whatever? Said Rose. No one is going on the roof, Amanda said. I'm not going on the roof, he said as he scratched his belly, stippled with hair, swollen from the midnight pasta. Besides, I'm not even sure if there's a problem up there on the roof or somewhere else, honestly. He gestured, indicating that something around them. Who could answer for sure what was going on with the world at large? Was it even still there? Why don't you go and sit outside? Look, I'll join you. I just need to talk to Mom for just a second. Give me a second, and I'll join you. Rose would have preferred television, but she also needed a task. She would accept her father's attention. You're coming? Just give me 2 minutes, he said. He looked past her at the morning, pale yellow and reluctant. She said, okay, fine. The way adolescents learn to pronounce it with all that fervor of a 4-letter word. The morning was quiet. It was pretty, but not as interesting as a television show. Rose slammed the door behind her without entirely meaning to. It was definitely nicer wherever Hazel was. Her television would never not work. Her parents let her have an unlocked Instagram account. Rose sat on the white metal chairs that looked outside into the woods, where the yard shrugged away from the house. The grass grew patchy, and was then just dust and leaves and weeds, and the hem of woods in the wilderness or whatever it was, in the space beyond that. Rose saw a deer with an abbreviated velvet antlers and a cautious, yet somehow almost bored mien, considering her through dark, strangely human eyes. She wanted to say, a deer. But there was no one to hear her. She looked over her shoulder into the house and saw her parents talking. She wasn't supposed to go to the pool, but she wasn't supposed to go into the pool by herself. She walked down the steps onto the damp grass and just watched the deer as the deer watched her, barely curious. She hadn't even seen that there was another beside it. No more. There were 5 deer. There were 7. Every time Rose adjusted her eyes to try to understand what she was seeing something near, something new. There were dozens of deer. Had she been up higher, she'd have understood that there were hundreds, more than 1,000, more than that even. She wanted to run inside and tell her parents, but she also wanted to just stand there and see in amazement thousands, an army of deer.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.